Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Live Show. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to have a very special guest to talk through some my guys, some bold calls, all that and much, much more. So everyone put your hands together and welcome Mr. Faraz Siddiqi, all things Upper Hand Fantasy. Make sure you guys are following them on Instagram. Also can check out upperhandfantasy.com. Faraz, welcome back, man.
Oh, man, I'm so excited. Ian. I'm so excited. We're finally here. It's draft season, baby. Let's go. Let's go.
I feel like this is draft season, right? August, okay, but like mid-July, because I don't know about you, but I'm actually getting together with my friends. Sad 8-man home league. Make fun of me if you want. I get it. But we actually have to draft next weekend because all these guys have babies being born and all these conflicts in August that they irresponsibly are prioritizing over a fantasy draft. So when do you consider like fantasy season really to be here?
Hey, man, that's not cool. Okay, like number one priority is like Labor Day weekend is just supposed to be dedicated to fantasy football draft. So I'm the commissioner of my home league. I do actually have 11 other friends. Actually, I have 2 friends. And then they all have other friends, and then we all kind of have a league together. but yeah, no, it's starting now. Best ball season's kind of still wrapping and still going. But I think the redraft season's here, baby. I think like you said, if your draft is starting next week, man, it's draft season.
Redraft season in the air. You guys heard it from Faraz himself. So chat, we appreciate you guys hanging out. If you have any questions for Faraz throughout the show, hit us up and we will get to those at the end. But first, it is time for the DraftKings opening lines. Let's talk some Travis Hunter. All right, guys, wanted to break down Travis Hunter because as someone who's entirely too online, he has been a hot topic of debate in those fantasy streets recently, just because everyone's trying to figure out what to do with this guy. I mean, Faraz, obviously, you got to be pretty freaking good to be the number 2 overall pick. That said, obviously, at least some of that value came from his ability to play both ways. And when you start looking at where he's going in fantasy drafts, man, really does seem like one of the more, boom or bust potential players out there in that wide receiver 3 range. So have a poll that we're going to pull up here that I actually asked my friendly followers on Twitter, where do you actually think that he's going to finish? Ended up getting a big time, I guess, majority going ahead and putting the wide receiver 3 range up there between wide receiver 25, wide receiver 36, which makes sense. But how are you kind of balancing this for us? Because again, it is a situation where not only do we have to wonder how good is Travis Hunter going to be at receiver, but we also have to wonder how much is he going to play receiver in the first place?
Yeah, 100%. And, coming into the league, you're looking at the talent that he has at wide receiver. Okay, sure. He's a great corner as well. But how good is he at wide receiver? Because I think that's really what it comes down to. Because if you have a potentially elite wide receiver on the sidelines while you're throwing passes, that doesn't do your offense any good. You have Brian Thomas Jr., but what do you really have behind that? They're going to want to have Travis Hunter on the field as much as possible. I personally believe that if he was just coming out as a wide receiver, he was still very, very worthy of where he was taking in the NFL draft, because I do believe that he is an elite prospect just at the wide receiver position. Now, you have a very, very good, potentially elite wide receiver in Brian Thomas Jr., so obviously he's going to take a ton of target share, but there is a world where Travis Hunter comes in here and absolutely lights the world on fire. And I would not be surprised if he finishes, top 15, maybe as a high-end wide receiver 2 in year 1, because I do believe that he's going to be on the field a ton.
It's just one of these decisions that you got to love in fantasy football land, where whatever side of the fence you're on, I think there's a very good chance that, again, if you're wrong, you're not just going to be wrong. You're going to feel really stupid for, having that opinion that you did. Because, again, maybe he is just only playing the 60% route rate role on offense. And it's like, oh, yeah, why did I think we were going to ever have enough volume? Or we're going to see him out there getting 8 targets in week 1, looking like one of the freaking best players on the field, which, oh, yeah, he's pretty much been his entire career. So I love going back sometimes and reading these guys, 24/7, like original recruiting, bios and everything. And shout out to whoever wrote Hunters. They were legit saying, even all the way back then coming out of high school, that this dude was wide receiver 1 and cornerback 1 in the entire class. So now trying to replicate it at the NFL level. We've had guys like Richard Sherman and Travis Kelce talk about the potential for offenses just to try to make them chase their wide receiver 3 deep and really run them out of gas. But hey, Travis Hunter, the Jaguars, pretty much everyone says this dude never gets tired. Certainly seems like he's going to have every chance to, again, be that star at the NFL level that he's been throughout his entire athletic career. So personally, I'm pretty fine with this wide receiver 30 price tag. It's a situation where I haven't gone out of my way to draft him throughout this offseason because earlier, Faraz, I know you're in these best ball streets, but he was going a lot closer, kind of that wide receiver 20, wide receiver 24 range. Once we get into this area where we're going up against guys like Calvin Ridley, Jalen Waddle, not that they aren't great, but there's question marks for them too. So wide receiver 30 price tag, you cool with that?
I am cool with that because now you're comparing to these guys. Now, do these guys have the same ceiling this year as someone like Travis Hunter with Liam Cohen coming in, who has shown that he can elevate his quarterback, who, former first round pick and first overall pick in Baker Mayfield. He could do it with Trevor Lawrence potentially. And there were multiple wide receivers who were able to get it done in Tampa. And we could be looking at something very similar here in Jacksonville. I do think it could happen.
Duval, everybody. Don't quite have my Liam Cohen down impression yet. We still got time to work that out before week 1. But guys, this has been DraftKings opening lines. Now a quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. UFC 318, Poirier Holloway 3 is coming in hot and the excitement is building with the fight world's biggest names set to clash in the octagon. Every strike, takedown, and upset could be unforgettable. Get on the action with my partners at DraftKings Sportsbook, and right now, new customers who bet just $5 get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using my promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. All right, Faraz, I know that you are a true fantasy sicko, and true fantasy sickos are going to be in a lot of drafts throughout, again, the thick of draft season here. So I wanted to get your opinion on a couple guys where, again, maybe not having 100% exposure. You could argue that's a little bit irresponsible in a game with football. Again, the ball isn't even freaking round yet. We're trying to predict what is going to be happening out here. That said, again, 2 names that you wanted to kind of share with us. The first of which is a pretty, I don't want to say popular late-round quarterback, but he has some of the tools. Talk about Patriots rising second-year quarterback Drake May and why you can't stop clicking his name.
I really can't, and especially on certain platforms. Like, he's just going way, way too late. I look at a poor man's Josh Allen, okay? Like, poor man's, okay? Like I said it. Big body, right? He got all his rushing production last year on scrambles. He gave us 37 rushing yards per game in his full games last year, and the only Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, and Jaden Daniels averaged more. But all of them were above a 18% design rush rate, according to fantasylife.com. Do you know where Drake May was? He was at 3%, dude. Okay, that's absolutely criminal. Alex Van Pelt, straight to jail, buddy. Okay?
Yeah,
and now, like, he has a real offensive coordinator now in Josh McDaniels, right? Josh McDaniels gave Cam Newton a 26% design rush rate a few seasons ago. And I think that part of May's game could be unlocked here. So I can totally see him being used around the goal line as well. We saw that at North Carolina. I think that would be the cherry on top. But it's not overly necessary. Now, if you look at the weapons too, he has some underrated new weapons here, right? Given the fact he still averaged 18.7 fantasy points per game in his full games last year. That was on pace to be QB9. He had an underrated rookie season, and I think he has a chance to surprise a lot of people. Like, I was banging the table for Jaden Daniels last year in drafts because of that potential upside, and now this year it's Drake May, it's Justin Fields, kind of around that same range with, extreme upside, potentially top 5, top 6.
Those really do seem to be the, Konami code late round quarterbacks where we can't expect a lot of rushing production. There's other names like JJ McCarthy, Cam Ward. Bryce Young actually had, some surprisingly great rushing stats down the stretch, but those are guys where you're just hoping they can find their way into the end zone a few times. Again, it's Fields and May who could legitimately go for 500 plus and be a weapon there on the ground. So I know, guys, we did put, Cam Newton and Drake May in the same breath, but even if we're not getting that full, just outcome, realize that Josh McDaniels isn't some, old school, just refusing to open up the offense sort of coach. This is a guy who, kind of wrongly, I guess, tried to build his offense around Tim Tebow back in the day. And to Faraz's point, really did have a lot of cool things on film with Cam Newton in that 2020 Patriots season. I did think we saw enough out of Drake May as a rookie to believe that he offers more upside than that post-shoulder surgery 2020 edition of Cam. And again, I love the kind of looking at the full games, because sometimes when we do this in the offseason, we look at the per game numbers, and someone like Drake May had a couple games early early in the year where he relieved Jacoby Brissett, barely played, and then he had the game against the Jets, I think, where he got knocked out pretty early. So I also took some numbers from that Faraz, and basically, if you give him the benefit of the doubt and just look at the full games, he and Jaden Daniels each cleared 220 passing yards and 35 rushing yards per game. The only other quarterbacks to do that in NFL history: our guy Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Mike Vick, Dante Culpepper, Randall Cunningham, Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, RG3, Donovan McNabb, and Steve Young. That's pretty freaking good company. We don't see archetypes like Drake May bust in Fantasyland, and we can get them outside the top 12 picks. Has this kind of caused your, I guess, strategy at the position this year where personally, I've been first or last, all right? If I want to pay up, it better be for like this dual threat alien, the Josh Allens and Lamar Jackson of the world. If you aren't getting those guys, are you pretty much bypassing that middle class just because Drake May is always waiting for you at the end?
Yeah, 100%. And then when I look at guys like in the middle, like you look at Kyler Murray and you're like, oh, like he is a potential Konami code. But then you look at what his offensive coordinator did, Drew Petzing, last year, only 9% design rushing rate last year, right? So he's not really putting it out there for him, despite him being a year removed from that ACL surgery. So I'm not quite buying it that, he's going to take a step forward in the rushing game. And then the same thing with Bo Nix, where like he was also at 10% design rushing rate. So does Sean Payton really want that to occur with him? And also, like, he kind of overproduced in terms of rushing touchdowns. I don't think we're going to see a lot of that this year. So those guys could remain those low-end QB1s. So for me personally, yes, I am bypassing all these guys. I'm taking the guys later, just like we did with Jaden Daniels last year. These guys could rise all the way to the top, all the way up to the top 5 potentially.
Another name I wanted to talk to you about, none other than Bengals RB1 Chase Brown, someone who I'm sure helped a lot of you guys win your fantasy championship last year. I know that week 17 got pretty sheeshy, got tackled at the 1 yard line and then slid down and hurt himself. Like, oh my God, dude, just go be like Devon Achane running backs. Just go score the touchdowns and ask questions later. I am so tired of this. I know he's trying to help his real life team, but talk about Chase Brown for us, someone who, again, if he could keep that same role he had in the second half of the year, his current RB12 price tag is going to look like a bargain.
Yeah, 100%. I had no idea that I had to fight off the Taj Brooks army this season. Like I had to fight off the Blake Corum army last year with Kyron Williams, and this year I feel like I got to fight the Taj Brooks army when it comes to Chase Brown. Zach Moss seems like an afterthought when it comes to how these coaches are talking about this backfield right now. Taj Brooks, obviously a day 3 pick, so he has a lot to go, and I think this offense really trusts Chase Brown at this point. If you look at, the big starts, like after week 9, after he got the real opportunity, he was the overall RB3 in fantasy points per game. That was only behind Saquon Barkley and Bijan Robinson. He had the 3rd most receiving yards among running backs behind Gibbs and Achane, and the 2nd most receiving yards per game behind Kamara. And we know that this offense is going to be potentially, they're going to throw the ball more than any other team in the NFL. Right, they're going to have a ton of production, obviously, with Joe Burrow, and he's basically going to be their 3rd receiver behind Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. You look at what he did last year in terms of opportunity, and as we know, targets are worth 2.5, a little bit more than 2.5 times, more valuable than a carry. So you're looking at the most expected fantasy points per game during that span that I just talked about last year, and he was on the field for 85% of snaps. Yes, they brought in Chase, they brought in Samaje Perine. Can Taj Brooks get a little bit of that early down work between the 20s? Sure. But you know what? He still had 75% of his targets come on early downs last year. So he could be just fine, even if Perine comes in and takes a little bit of a few snaps away, on passing downs.
I've been poking fun at some of these, late round running backs. We got, obviously Cincy, Washington, several of these teams use these day 3 picks on them. And you're right, there's truthers everywhere. And I'm going to look dumb eventually because one of these guys is going to end up having a really good year. And I keep writing all of them off. But guys, again, just putting the name aside, if you could have gone into this offseason and say, okay, the only competition the Bengals are going to add is old friend, to be fair, Samaje Perine, and a freaking day 3 rookie, that's a win for Chase Brown. Okay, maybe the day 3 rookie turns out being fantastic. I know Chase Brown originally didn't have the highest draft capital in his own right, but I'm going to show you guys a chart right now that really, again, just gives me a lot of confidence in following Faraz's lead and going with Chase Brown. I want to see what teams were actually just most willing to leave one single running back on the field. And Faraz shouted out Kyron Williams before. Yes, of course, Sean McVay loves featuring one guy. Freaking 29% of the games for the Rams last year, they did leave Kyron Williams on the field for 90% plus of the snaps. But the number 2 most willing offense to feature your one single workhorse? That's right, it was the Cincinnati Bengals. So that really is the trick here for us. Like, we need to try to find running backs who not only can play across all three downs, but have a coaching staff willing to leave them out there. So yes, it's not a perfect clear-cut situation where we are 100% sure that Chase Brown is going to be in that same second half role. But I feel like the discounted price we're getting is great, because if we leave week one and he has that same 80% plus snap rate, I don't know about you, man, we're probably going to be ranking him as a top 5 RB again as soon as week 2.
100%. Bijan was second during that span at 79%. So, and Chase Brown, there's a chance Chase Brown averages more targets per game than Bijan Robinson. So, at the end of the day, like, that's really what it comes down to. All comes down to opportunity. And like, when it comes to Taj Brooks too, like you mentioned with the day 3 running backs, sometimes these day 3 running backs, you're like, this guy, super efficient in college. I think he could really carve out a role. And sometimes, for even me, I look at these day 3 running backs sometimes, I'm like, I really like that guy. I think he could have some opportunity. But when it comes to Taj Brooks, like, listen, no disrespect to Taj Brooks. I wish him the best NFL career possible, but I just don't necessarily think that with his profile, he's going to come in and take a whole lot of work in year 1.
And hey, guys, I'm someone who spent way too many final round draft darts on Chris Evans over the years, all right? I have been down these streets before. Maybe Taj Brooks is going to be the rare, exception to the rule. But with Chase Brown, again, someone where I do think that at a minimum, guys really should be looking strong at him in that round 3, round 4 range. So Drake May and Chase Brown, you guys heard from Faraz himself. We got some more to talk about, though, right after a quick word to our friends over at Premier National Sports. Guys, Premier National Sports is a pretty great organization. I would actually argue very great, that is trying to help high school athletes get ready for the next level and accordingly get some of that sweet NIL cash along the way. Way back in the day, we're going over a decade plus now, I was actually coming out of high school and getting recruited by a bunch of D3 schools, all right? I was way too slow playing linebacker to be going anywhere serious, but imagining if I had actually been one of these marquee athletes, I cannot imagine, again, what you would be doing today. One, trying to figure out where you want to spend the next 4 years of your life and get developed to hopefully make the pros, but also to try to make potentially life-changing money in the wild, wild west that is the NIL era right now in college football. So again, guys, Premier National Sports is trying to help you through that entire process. They're a trusted recruiting and NIL resource for high school athletes and their families. You can help these high school athletes take their game to the next level with personalized recruiting strategies and NIL education. So whether it's you, friend, family, check them out if you haven't yet. You can get in touch with their team at premiernationalsports.com. All right, Faraz, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts here on a handful of archetypes, players who just really managed to boom over the past few years that have the entire fantasy community chasing that success. All right, who is this year's X? Going to start off with, a couple more recent names, specifically Puka Nacua. And to get one thing straight, there's probably not going to be another Puka Nacua this year. All right, we're talking about a guy that had one of the greatest rookie seasons, period, at the wide receiver position, but specifically these day 3 hit rates at wide receiver, nearly non-existent. We're talking about Puka Nacua and Tyreek Hill as the only rookie wide receivers that have posted top 24 numbers that were drafted round 4 or later originally, okay? And honestly, Tyreek Hill was only in that because of some off-the-field stuff he had going on prior to even getting to the NFL. So with that said, Faraz, day 3 rookie wide receivers that you think might have a chance to boom, maybe not fully like Puka, but at least giving you a lot. I would throw a couple out there originally just in terms of Jalen Royals with the Chiefs. That's one. We got a couple guys in the Titans, even have people shouting out Dante Thornton, Jalen Lane, Keandre Lambert-Smith going on with the Chargers. And these day 3 wide receivers really have your attention this year?
I'm going to give you one, man, and you might be surprised. I'm talking Torrey Horton from the Seattle Seahawks. Listen, you look at what they have there. First of all, I'm a fan of Horton's talent. When it comes to talent, I think he has it. I think he's underrated. He's coming from a small school, some injuries, but I think if he was drafted last year, I think he would have been a day 2 guy potentially. And now you look at what they have in Seattle. They have JSN. They have Cooper Kupp. Who knows who Cooper Kupp is right now? They don't necessarily have this X receiver, right? They traded away DK Metcalf, and now they're kind of left with, maybe one slot, one flanker. And I know, the way that Kubiak likes to do things, bunching up these wide receivers, and, like all these wide receivers are playing different styles. They're all bunched up to the line of scrimmage, but still they're going to need somebody to line up on the line, right? And I think that could be Torrey Horton. I know they're talking about Elijah Arroyo as a wide receiver as well, but they don't necessarily have that outside guy. So I think Elijah Arroyo, super under the radar right now. I think he's somebody, even in Dynasty, there's not that much, chatter about him. And some people might even be thinking about taking him off their taxi squad to go pick up this other guy. I wouldn't do that. I'm a believer in the talent. Now, I'm not sure how far Sam Darnold can take him, right? That's another question. But I do think there's some hidden talent there, and he could be a little bit of a gem. Hopefully, so showing some signs in year one.
It is a situation where I've looked at the Seahawks offense and everything Clint Kubiak was doing in New Orleans. It was like, okay, deep play action shots. Like that is something I could see Darnold, gelling with. But I was like, well, that's not exactly Cooper Kupp's game in the year 2025. JSN, someone's working more underneath. So my mind has gone to free agent acquisition, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. But if we've learned one thing over the years for us, I think that the answer is never going to be MVS. Okay. Shout out to, he had a nice, 7-week stretch in New Orleans. But this is actually a great pick, man. Caught me by surprise. But the more I look at it, 33 combined catches of 20 plus yards during those 2022, 2023 seasons. That was the 7th most in the FBS. And this dude does have that sort of speed and honestly size that is, at least height wise, missing in this wide receiver room. So again, Sam Darnold is a situation where, yeah, I know last year was a bit of an exception to the rule of him not being a great quarterback, but certainly now has 100 million reasons to hopefully make things work out in Seattle. God forbid that offensive line can just be a little bit closer to average as opposed to that, near league worst unit they've been in recent years. I like that pick a lot, my friend. Let's talk about the running back position, though, because as we saw last year, Bucky Irving absolutely broke out and made a lot of people a lot of money as that, again, day 3 late round pick that wound up by the end of the season winning out over Rashad White and getting that job. So we have seen running backs, Faraz, I guess, come out of nowhere a bit more often than wide receivers. Specifically, looking at the past decade, we've had Bucky Irving, Damian Pierce, Elijah Mitchell, James Robinson, Phillip Lindsay, Jordan Howard, and Carlos Williams all post top 24 numbers, despite being a day 3 pick or UDFA. So a bit more common than wide receiver. And man, like just going through some of these names, man, there actually are quite a few options where I could see them getting there. So I don't think we're going to be going with Taj Brooks here, with all due respect, but do you have a name for someone who could potentially be this year's Bucky Irving?
Oh man, this is really tough, and somebody who I absolutely love, who went on day 3. When did Bashal Tutin go? Bashal Tutin went round 4, was it? Or was it round 3? Was it round 4, right? So if I had to pick one, it would probably be him. And it really comes down to Liam Cohen and who he drafted last year. He drafted one of the most efficient running backs, despite him going in day 3. He drafted one of the most efficient running backs coming out of that class, which was Bucky Irving. I get it. Like, he was undersized. He had a very, very rough combine, but Bucky Irving was still that dude, and he was efficient in both the running game and the receiving game. We're talking after contact. We're talking missed tackles forced, all of it. And I think that's something that Liam Cohen likes because he just drafted Bashal Tutin. There's only one running back who was more efficient combined in terms of after contact rate and missed tackle rate this year. That was Bashal Tutin was number 2, and number 1 was Ashton Jency, right? So he is somebody who is extremely underrated, I think, going into the season. And yes, there's a lot of competition there, right? There's obviously Travis Etienne, who was one of the most inefficient running backs last year. There was, obviously it's a go against Tank Bigsby, who was actually number 1 in missed tackles forced per attempt this past season. So a lot of competition there. But something that I look at is Rashad White was also one of the most inefficient runners going into last season, and Bucky was able to take advantage. And now he's kind of competing with Travis Etienne, who was one of the most inefficient runners. But his calling card and his saving grace might be the receiving game, similar to similar situation to Rashad White. So we could see a situation where, week 6, week 7, that Bashal Tutin could be the back that you want on this Jacksonville team.
And it is one of these things, too, where I find myself falling victim to this sometimes where I just go, oh, Bashal Tutin, round 4 pick. He went pick 104. It was the second pick of the 4th round. If he goes pick 102, I would probably be singing, a different tune about it. I'm sure many others would as well. So good to remember the overall pick number sometimes with these guys. But you're spot on where, yes, Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, trying to give them their flowers and stuff. But when it is a brand new coaching staff, you would like to think that slate is going to be wiped somewhat clean. Best guy's going to rise to the top. So obviously, Tutin, we do have some ball security, job security concerns. But again, fell to day 3, at least for some reason, but also given just the overall stacked nature, allegedly stacked nature, at least of this running back class, certainly not the worst year to be, again, going in that round 4 convo. But I think he fits that bill, man. Again, it's an offense that we do expect to make some improvements. We're not blown away by the, current competition that's there. But again, there are several guys I think fit this archetypes. Cam Scatabo for the Giants, Tyron Tracy, Devin Singletary, again, wouldn't be the most shocking thing if he ends up winning out there. Dylan Sampson with the Browns, particularly now with Quinshon Judkins' availability being murky at best. Cowboys running back Jaden Blue, that explosive pass-catching talent with 2 veterans who I would say are pretty close to wash at this point. Ollie Gordon with the Dolphins. My Jalen Wright shares would be in shambles, but I must admit Ollie Gordon does have the size to potentially get that, Raheem Mostert early down roll. Even Kyle Monangai with the Bears, again, DeAndre Swift propaganda I've been spreading would be down bad there, but hey, it could happen. Even Washington, man, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, there is a truther fan base emerging here for Roz for the guy. And honestly, Shrine Bowl MVP, like you can paint a story for a bunch of these guys. I like the Tootin call. Have you been going out of your way to draft these guys? I will say the price is pretty reasonable for the majority. Jaden Blue, Cam Scatabo, the only ones that go in even somewhat early, but even then, we're still talking only RB4s.
Yeah, 100%. With Scatabo, it's tough because he's going right next to Tyron Tracy, right? So it's like you have to make a call there, right? You have to say, okay, I believe, and I am personally somebody who does believe in Scatabo. I think his skill set's really good, extremely efficient in the run game. But like one really underrated thing with him, he was one of the most efficient pass catching running backs in this entire class, and we know how deep this class was, so that says something. So Tyron Tracy, former wide receiver, he's also somebody who was very efficient in the receiving game, both in college and in the pros in his first year. So there's a little bit of overlap there when it comes to the receiving game, but when it comes to the goal line, and this is the thing is that the Giants offense is not one who we think is going to score a lot of points. So is that a role we should be chasing? Is this going to be a 1A, 1B situation the entire year? So in that situation, maybe I'm not going all out of my way. In Dynasty, love it. But right now, maybe not. But Tootin, at his price, where he's going, I really like that range personally.
Love you giving to Scatabo because for my money's worth, man, he had the most impressive single game performance in all of college football last year. 2 years ago, I would have given it to CJ Stroud against Georgia. Last year, probably Michael Penix against Texas. And then I don't know what it is about the Longhorns, but they seem to bring out the best in whoever they're playing. Again, that New Year's Day game where Scatabo was going nuts, breaking tackles. He threw a freaking touchdown and he can pass. Shout out Boobie Miles. And then to your point, he's making catches 50 yards down the field. That should be the sort of running back where, again, if things fall right, we can't get excited about in fantasy land. So good stuff there on a wide receiver and running back. Last one, though. Who do you think could be this year's version of Sam Darnold? A quarterback who, again, has largely been written off, formerly high draft pick, finally puts it together on a new team. Geno Smith, someone who, yes, did go round 2, but kind of fits that mold. Baker Mayfield as well. Daniel Jones, Justin Fields, Kenny Pickett, if you really want to get weird. Do you think any of these guys have a chance for Oz, or is the most likely answer maybe closer to no?
Yeah, you mentioned Justin Fields, right? Justin Fields, like he was what, QB7 last year in the games that he started before Russell Wilson took over. So I 100% think that Justin Fields can have a little bit of an emergence. The key thing with Fields is that we know he's not going to get benched. That was the key last year. He was going to get benched. Russell Wilson was back. So, at the end of the day, like I think Fields with that rushing ability there, he has Garrett Wilson. I think he can have a big year.
I actually asked the fine folks over on Twitter what they thought about this and got almost 2,000 votes so far. 45% Justin Fields, 14% Daniel Jones, 1.8% Kenny Pickett, 39% no, all these guys can F off. And honestly, I don't really disagree with the 39% that chose to go with that option. So again, I got my Buckeye jersey in the background. I would love to see Justin Fields finally put it all together. Unfortunately, though, outside of old BFF Garrett Wilson, really is a sad excuse for a passing game in terms of the weapons they got there. Honestly, man, just again, the offensive line, just the plethora of wide receivers they got going on, even Tyler Warren now in Indianapolis. I can almost talk myself into the environment bringing out the best in Daniel Jones. I'm just not super convinced that, again, he actually has what it takes to miss most out of it. But we're going to be talking about, again, one of those wide receivers a little bit later in the show. Next, though, it's time for quarter 3, guys. What did we learn last year? Always good in some of these down weeks in July in the offseason to try to go through again some of the biggest breakouts or, busts from last season, try to see what happened, why maybe we were wrong with our initial review on it, and then apply those lessons into 2025 and beyond. So Faraz, wanted to start off with a handful of running backs who, again, weren't necessarily being completely written off, but they weren't doing very good in 2023. They found new teams in 2024. Previously, man, I've always done these free agency, articles, and just the track record of players changing teams, again, these big money deals in free agency, not great. Usually the best players are either re-signing with their original team or good enough to be fetching serious trade capital when you actively hit the open market. Usually not the best sign of things to come. And then Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and Josh Jacobs decided to say F all that. So personally, man, when I look at this, I still think there's something to be said about an offensive environment being, again, the offensive environment should come first, all right? You can't just have this great running back, throw him into the league's worst offense and expect all these, great numbers to come. That said, when you do already have that sundae, you have your ice cream, you have your sprinkles, your whipped cream and stuff, that great running back can be the cherry on top, man. So again, we don't want to start with the cherry, but if you can get it, absolutely. So what did you learn? And maybe were you a little bit surprised by how Saquon, Derrick Henry, and Josh Jacobs balled out? Because, man, anyone that was just consistently drafting these guys last year, I'm sure you made a lot of money.
100%. I mean, with Derrick Henry, every single year you're like, oh man, when is this guy going to fall off? The rules, you just can't apply the rules to Derrick Henry, right? So with him, I had to just eliminate him from this conversation because regardless of what was going to happen there, he was going to do his thing. We saw Gus Edwards the year before leading the NFL, leading all running backs in goal line attempts, and obviously Henry was going to get his. And this going into this year, Lamar Jackson has had so many. He was so efficient in the red zone, and a lot of that could have went Derrick Henry's way potentially if things just didn't work out. So he could have even had a bigger year. But yeah, I think Josh Jacobs was probably one of my biggest surprises. I think they ran the ball a lot more than we thought they were going to, and Josh Jacobs ended up staying relatively healthy. Throughout that year, he was able to do his thing. But yeah, I was very surprised, man. And obviously, Saquon Barkley, ridiculously efficient on a great offense, and the tush push didn't really bother him that much.
Oh, no. And I mean, it did bother him a little bit, but just didn't matter because he said, why worry about scoring from the 1 yard line when I can score from the 50 every week out here, So again, Saquon just being able to get that done. I will say too, with some of these, Saquon had that high ankle sprain early on in 2023. So when the efficiency was down afterwards, maybe we didn't give him enough credit for playing through the pain. Josh Jacobs had the contract situation where he wasn't even, really practicing throughout the summer, didn't have the good vibes going on with the Raiders. Obviously wasn't an offense we really liked. So looking at it and seeing maybe you could fit some of these molds ahead of 2025. Pre-firework accident, I think Najee Harris could have had a case a little bit of hey, the Steelers offense wasn't exactly bringing the best out of anyone, but then they also drafted Martin Hampton, so that's tough to get behind. Are you open to Javonte Williams fitting this? Because again, he is someone where we've seen good stuff from the past. I guess my problem is I think the Broncos are a better offensive environment than the Cowboys. Doesn't exactly match up with these guys.
Yeah, I mean, the only case that he has is the brutal injury that he had 2 years ago, right? So now he is, in Sean Payton's words, 2 years removed from that injury. So does that make a difference? Maybe it can. I think so. A lot of these, doctors out there are saying that there is a chance that he could potentially at least be somewhat close to what he was before. And what he was before, just to remind you guys, he was one of the most efficient running backs, in college football and, in the pros when he started in his rookie year. So I was really high on Javonte. It was a brutal injury. And I think that, it is possible, but the Broncos had a pretty good offensive line. He couldn't get it done last year. If you can't get it done as a running back in a Sean Payton offense with as much opportunity that you get, I mean, I'm not sure it might be over for you.
I'm with you, man. Again, rookie year, Javonte, bring up that Vince McMahon gif. He was absolutely special out there, but been quite some time there since we've seen that. Last point on these running backs. You mentioned being high on Kyren Williams last year. Kudos to you. I was a little bit down, not because of the punt returner nonsense, but I just thought they used the day 2 pick on Blake Corum, and they just all the coach speak throughout the offseason. I thought we were going to get a bit more of a committee. Wasn't the case. I showed you guys the graphic earlier. Again, Sean McVay continued to just really rely on one single running back. That said, new year, new Kyren. We also have have Jarquez Hunter going in day 3. That said, for us, I wanted to give Kyren maybe a little bit of respect here. No, he didn't, change teams or anything, but I personally put out, plenty of the efficiency stats that, again, paint Kyren as being pretty bad. Awesome success rate and everything. I get that, and that matters, but the explosiveness, even forcing missed tackles wasn't great. That said, man, he was playing behind an O-line where every single starter missed a game. They had at least 12 guys play at least 50 snaps last year. We only have to go back to 2023 to see the last time Kyren was averaging north of 5 yards per carry. So are you backing on Kyren this year as well?
I am less in on Kyren this year than I was last year for a couple of reasons. The year before, in 2023, going into 2024, he was pretty darn efficient, man, in 2023. Yeah. And that was part of the reason why I wasn't as high on Blake Corum making a huge dent or significant dent in that backfield. Now going into this year, Kyren, in my opinion, like you're looking at what he was able to do last year, he's not overly special. Right. And obviously they're working on a deal with him right now. I will say this. I'm way more worried about Jarquez Hunter making a dent than I was with Blake Corum, because I'm a huge fan of Jarquez Hunter. I think he was, he was on paper extremely efficient in college in both of the categories that you mentioned. So is this a situation where they look at what they have in training camp? Does that affect the contract that they're going to give Kyren Williams? I don't know. Who knows? It's a possibility. But I'm not as in on Kyren this year as I was last year. So we'll see what ends up happening. I'm not really projecting that, there's a takeover here. But if Jarquez ever gets some opportunity this year and he pops off, I will be a little bit worried.
Also, what makes sense is the presence of Devontae Adams encourages them to throw the ball just a little bit more often near the end zone. Usually that's been where Kyren has made all of his money and scored all those fancy points for his loyal managers. So let's talk about another running back lesson from last year, and that is what did we learn from Zamir White being one of the worst picks in fantasy. And if you made it and you're listening right now, thank you for listening. We've all made bad picks, okay? They happen. But just looking at Zamir White, I do think even in hindsight, there were some, red flags that we probably should have seen coming. This was an offense that we didn't expect, to be exactly lighting up the scoreboard. We had questions about Zamir White, the pass catcher, and we were going off a relative small sample size to begin with. So when I was trying to, again, apply those lessons and looking for these landmines in the running back, stratosphere out here for us, Isaiah Pacheco pops a little bit. Now, the Chiefs offense should be a lot better, but I'm just saying this is a guy where we're like, oh, well, back in 2023, he was doing this. Again, Chiefs back-to-back 15th ranked scoring offenses. It's not 1-for-1, but I did worry about that. Tyron Tracy, maybe. Pass down stuff wasn't great last year. They brought in some new competition. Not an offense we love, but then again, he's also going a little bit cheaper as Zamir White was. Chuba Hubbard, perhaps. He's got better underlying numbers than Zamir White, but again, maybe a situation where, like, are we really chasing up the running back on the Carolina Panthers as high as we are? Any of those names giving you Zamir White vibes, or is there someone I'm forgetting?
I think Chuba Hubbard definitely gives a little bit of Zamir White. The problem with this is that Zamir White's sample size was so small, and Chuba Hubbard was able to kind of put it together for the entire season, once Miles Sanders got hurt and he took over, and he was relatively efficient. He was pretty good. Like, I think that now, did they really add a whole lot to that backfield where you need to be worried? I'm not overly worried about it myself. So I can't call this apples to apples. This is maybe more of a Mike Davis situation, than anything else. But Chuba Hubbard, he's a little bit of a quote unquote safer pick this year than Zamir White was last year. If you picked Zamir White last year, like, you just fell for the trap. Like, it was right there. Like, it was the booby trap, the booby trap pick. Like, it was the booby trap pick from last year, right? So some of these guys can potentially fall into that bucket. There are more wide receivers that I'm worried about in that range than running backs, because you got the James Connors and the David Montgomerys of the world also in that dead zone. Even Alvin Kamara kind of falling a little bit as well. Yeah. So you have those running backs who've kind of veteran running backs who've proved it in that range. So it might not be overly apples to apples this season.
I agree. Not 1-for-1 by any stretch. The Panthers also did pay Chuba down the stretch of last year. I think he's going to need to really put some bad, performances out there one after another to be losing his job or anything in a similar manner as Zamir White. That said, Rico Dowdle, we did see him do some good things in Dallas last year. And again, just Chuba overall, just not being exactly this prolific pass catcher. And then more than anything, like, all right, this Panthers offense, they made some strides in the second half of last year. But again, if you had to go 1 through 32, I have a feeling you still would be ranking the Panthers as a likely bottom 10 10 scoring offense. So again, just questions you got to be asking yourself when you're using anything close to elite draft capital on some of these running backs. Chuba does apply there just a little bit. Last one for us, I want to talk about what we maybe learned from Jaden Daniels being the late round quarterback of last year. I know you shouted out Drake May earlier. I am with you there on him likely being the lesson to learn. Anyone else though that you think maybe could provide maybe a middle class man's version of what Jaden brought to the table in 2024?
Yeah, and that's like kind of the sweet spot where that range is, right? Justin Fields, Drake May, these are guys who, the Jaden Daniels' presence at his price in drafts last year allowed you to stack up at the skill positions. And then, you were able to stack that potential high-end quarterback on top of that league-winning quarterback on top of that. This year, it happens all the time. Like Lamar Jackson at one point after his rookie year, he was also a late round guy, right? So you know what? You want to identify those guys, and sometimes you pick an Anthony Richardson. It happens. I'm guilty. Okay, but I will say that there's an opportunity here. I look at these as opportunities to really skip out on all those middle quarterbacks. Go with the guys who can really have that top 5 upside because they could potentially be up there, top 2, top 3 in overall rushing yards among all quarterbacks. I think this is a huge lesson from last year. This is actually my favorite one, honestly, because when it comes down to team management and team roster construction, I think this is one of the most important examples.
Again, guys, I brought this stat up before. I'll probably bring it up again. 28 of 31 quarterbacks with 100-plus carries since 2014 finished top 12 in terms of fantasy points per game. These guys seldom bust. Okay, so yes, Anthony Richardson had the injuries, decided to take a playoff, which was a pretty atrocious decision, both in the moment and then even in hindsight. So it didn't work with Richardson. I was with you where I love Jaden Daniels, but one of the lessons I kind of learned over the years too was like just because you have a cheaper archetype doesn't make the more expensive guy necessarily a bad pick. So I drafted a lot of Richardson and a lot of Daniels. I wish I could go back and tell myself 12 months ago just to lean into that cheaper one. But again, we will watch the film and get better as always. So good combo there, my friend. Now though, let's get bold out here. Time for some bull calls here as we get into quarter 4. Get the 4s up, everyone. Quarter 4 here on the Fantasy Live Show, going through 2 bull calls each. Faraz, no surprise. Let's talk some more Drake May.
Oh, man, here we go. Drake May finishing as a top 5 fantasy quarterback, man. And we talked about it already, right? We had a whole segment about, I don't have to go through it all, but I will say Drake May, because of the designed rushing attempts being so low last year, and his actual rushing yards per game being so high, top 3, top 4 last year, I think Josh McDaniels is going to change that, and Drake May is going to finish as a top 5 quarterback.
Stephon Diggs seemingly on track to be out there week 1. A lot of people love Kyle Williams. You add in Josh McDaniels again, everything going right for Drake May. And again, we just talked about what the floor is, even with just the rushing. Really does seem like a great chance to buy this guy far closer to his floor than for us, as aforementioned, top 5 ceiling. I'm going to go with Calvin Ridley finishing as a top 15 fantasy wide receiver. I will say Faraz outdid me on being bold here, so maybe I should even say top 10 or something like that. But basically with Ridley, again, I've had Matthew Friedman, Dwayne McFarland, our projection guys on this show plenty, and I keep begging them to boost this dude's target numbers because I really do think 150 plus is firmly within his range of outcomes. I know he's got an age that starts with the number 3, but a little bit younger in football years, came out late to begin with, and obviously had the gambling stuff going on there. So I would just say, guys, that again, when you look at him, he finished better than Marvin Harrison Jr., Xavier Worthy, and Jalen Waddle last season, and I just don't think we are properly weighing the potential for Cam Ward to be a massive upgrade under center for a wide receiver that has basically less target competition than anyone else in the league. All right. You can look at Garrett Wilson, what he's got going on with the Jets, but Titans are on any short list of just the saddest kind of wide receiver 2 through the rest of the roster. So loving me some Calvin Ridley. And again, just that wide receiver 32 price tag right now, he is going alongside clear cut number 2 options. Whereas I think if things roll right for him, he really can be something close to a wide receiver 1 in fantasy land. So give me Calvin Ridley. But Faraz, I mentioned before, you could be a little bit more bold than me. Talk about Josh Downs not finishing top 15, top 12. Let's get it.
Top 12, baby. And you can draft him as the wide receiver 46. Okay, here's the thing. Daniel Jones, I believe that Daniel Jones is actually going to be okay. And I also think he's going to be the starter for this season. The coaches have talked up the fact that they want consistency out of their quarterback this year. That's the word that they have been using consistently throughout the offseason. And I don't know if we can say that about Anthony Richardson. So I do think Daniel Jones is going to be the starter for most of the season, maybe not, maybe all of the season. If you look at the Giants last year in the first 10 weeks of the season, hit seven. If you look at the top 7 wide receivers in catchable target rate, Neighbors, Slayton, and Wandale. 3 of Daniel Jones' wide receivers ranked top 7 in catchable target rate. Okay, so now Downs steps into that same slot-heavy setup that Wandale was in, but he's a completely different caliber player, not just a possession guy. He earned elite usage as a rookie despite brutal quarterback situation, right? And then even last year, 30% first read target share. That was higher than Brian Thomas Jr., higher than Ladd McConkey. 2.28 yards per route run. That was right behind Malik Neighbors. He was 3rd in targets per route run. Top 15 in target share, expected fantasy points, first downs per route run. So now you're going to get better quarterback play. Remember, the quarterback situation for the Colts last year was not good. Okay, so I think he can blow away that wide receiver 46 price tag, high floor, elite usage. The upside's real, man.
ESPN Open Rating has had Josh Downs as one of the best separators in the league. Anyone that's been watching the dude's film already knows that, again, he does seem special. And he was doing this last year, man, banged up. He had that high ankle sprain in August that all of a sudden made me terrified of all the times I drafted him. And I know he didn't put forward a wide receiver 1 season, but had a toe sprain in October, then had a shoulder injury in November. Again, like this is like Travis Etienne level. Oh my gosh, it just tanked his entire season. And now we have to make these injury excuses. Josh Downs had that go down and still was able to actually, play through the pain. Something special going on in that Colts wide receiver room. Shout out Michael Pittman as well, playing through that back injury. So again, there is some target competition here for us, but we see this, man. We talked about there's the Jaguars and the Cowboys backfields. Everyone's cheap there. Then we got the Packers and these Colts wide receiver rooms where we like the talent there, but it's almost just like a situation we don't exactly, or at least the public doesn't exactly know how it's going to go. So accordingly, yes, we got to admit there's Tyler Warren, there's Pittman, there's other guys, but that's more than being baked in this price tag right now.
All of these wide receivers are cheap. And you bring up a great point. Like target Michael Pittman also. Target Tyler Warren. Like I am kind of cool with taking Tyler Warren as my tight end 1 because I'm also a sicko. Yeah. And a lot of these wide receiver values, I'd rather take them than these tight ends because they offer a little bit of a higher positional advantage. But even Tyler Warren. Now, another offense, we talked about Drake Mays too. The Patriots as well. I think Stephon Diggs, priced outside the top 45 wide receivers as well. So you look at Kyle Williams as a potential late round pick as the potential wide receiver 2 there over Demario Douglas. We'll see. But all these guys are values. I think, like you mentioned, the Packers, they could be throwing more next year. These are a couple of teams that I think we should be taking advantage of these values, sneaky upside for all of them.
I'm going to talk about a wide receiver that's priced a little bit higher up there. It is Mr. DK Metcalf there for the Steelers. This one scares me. Honestly, I say it out loud and I start to question myself already, but I still think we can get some top 10 numbers out of DK. Faraz, this has been one of these guys where I've drafted year after year chasing, some of those 2020 highs, but I just don't think God put many players with his natural ability, size, speed, talent, even on this planet. And I do want to continue to chase this guy now that he arguably could be getting, I don't want to say the best quarterback play of his career. He did have a couple years with Russ doing his thing, and all due respect to Geno, but biggest thing for me is we're no longer attached to prime Tyler Lockett. We no longer have a young up-and-coming Jackson Smith and the Jigba. I mentioned the Jets and Titans wide receiver rooms. I mean, all due respect, I guess, to Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson, but man, there really does seem like there's potential for DK to absolutely take this offense over. Steelers have over 130 million reasons to try to make that a reality. So I know Arthur Smith is there, but I feel like this is almost like being a bit overstated here in the fantasy community. A.J. Brown was on 129 target pace back in 2020. We had Russell Gage working as Arthur Smith's number 1, getting 114 targets in 2021. Drake London, 117. George Pickens, 125 target pace last year. So again, I would like more than that, but I think given the relative lack of competition that's on the table, what are your thoughts on DK Metcalf this year for us?
Drake London was the clear number 1 wide receiver there. He got the target share with Arthur Smith, but he didn't get the production. Now, the quarterback situation was pretty bad, right? So we have to take that into account. And if you look at all the other number 1 wide receivers, yes, they got the target share. The production wasn't there. Now, is this the best quarterback that Arthur Smith has had? That is that could be potentially true this season. Now, I do have a little bit of pause here with DK Metcalf. Like, Drake London, I think, was a better receiver. A.J. Brown was potentially an elite receiver at that time. As soon as he leaves that situation, he ends up going crazy. He was extremely efficient in Tennessee, but he ended up going to Philly and ended up, taking advantage of that efficiency, turning it into actual volume and production. I have my doubts with DK Metcalf this year. Aaron Rodgers is another quarterback who likes to depend on wide receivers actually creating separation. And, is DK Metcalf going to only create separation deep? Is he going to be able to create that separation, on slants and on breaking routes and stuff like that? I don't know. So I'm a little bit worried. I can totally see this being the case because he is really the only guy there. Like I don't think Calvin Austin's going to have a resurgence here. Actually, I do. Arthur Smith's coaching them. Actually, I do. I think Calvin Austin, you heard it here first, high-end wide receiver 3 this year. But no, I totally get it. I'm a little bit hesitant, though. I can't lie.
I could see it being January. It's like, yeah, look at that target competition. DK had 1,500 yards. Of course he did. I could also see it being week 4, watching the highlights of Rodgers screaming at Metcalf on the sideline, and then DK, chucks his helmet at him or something like that. So again, can go either way, but there aren't that many guys in that range. He's going next to Jameson Williams, like legit Devonta Smith, wide receiver 2s of the world. I have been willing to, again, take some gambles here on DK at that price. We'll find out in a few months if that was a good idea or not. So good stuff for us. Next up, we have some chat questions we want to get to. Time for some overtime, everybody. I want to thank everyone in the chat for hanging out with us. Faraz, we got a couple questions. First from Tom Burton. How far of a drop would actually make Najee Harris a value for you? Someone who was going pretty close to that, RB 33, 34 spot before the firework incident. Man, if he starts to slip a little bit more, all of a sudden, chance to buy someone who could actually be a flex for us at more of a pure handcuff price.
Yeah, I think as a flex, he'll be perfectly fine. Like we saw in this system that J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards were also 1-2 punch, despite J.K. Dobbins being so efficient in year 1. He was a second-round pick, of course, but regardless, he was performing and killing it on the field, 6 yards per carry that year, but it didn't matter. Greg Roman still trotted out Gus Edwards with a similar amount of volume. So I can understand that. I can also see him being, mixed in on the goal line as well. I look at a similar situation with J.K. Dobbins, maybe, and I'd rather have that situation because we know that Sean Payton backfields, just you can have multiple running backs really do their thing. So if they're anywhere close to each other, I prefer the Dobbins pick over Najee. That's kind of how I'm looking at it.
I'd say Ramondre Stevenson too at this point. But if we get Najee going next to Trey Benson, Tyler Algier, that's when I'm going to start calling him a value. So good question, Tom. From Matt English, let's talk Caleb Johnson's value in Dynasty. Matt cannot stop acquiring him. You in on the Caleb Johnson experience for us?
Yeah, I'm cool with it. I think that over his career, he's gotten a lot better. And this last season that he was really, really good. He's one of the smoothest runners in this draft class. I am a fan. Now, Jaylen Warren does need to get out of the way because I do think that he's going to be very involved. And it is very possible that they do end up moving on. And then, he becomes Mike Tomlin's guy that he's featuring on all 3 downs. That's really what we're waiting for. And when we've seen it before with, obviously Le'Veon Bell, he was a different talent, but we saw it with D'Angelo Williams. We saw it Najee Harris early in his career. It would be amazing to get that similar opportunity, for this rookie. That would be amazing. I hope it happens, but we need to see this other guy get out the way a little bit.
Jaylen Warren certainly could be a thorn in the side this year at least, but Mike Tomlin's on record saying he's a featured running back type of guy. Love some of the names you pulled out, getting the flashbacks there. Last one from Steven. We want to rank 4 running backs. Caleb Johnson is one of them. Then Omarion Hampton, DeAndre Swift, Isaiah Pacheco. Personally, I think you probably agree for us. Omarion Hampton, number 1. A little bit closer after that. I personally would go DeAndre Swift, then Pacheco, then Caleb. What say you? We'll assume this is just for 2025.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm viewing it as well. I think Pacheco has a huge range of outcomes, right? He could be an RB1 potentially this year. He could be an RB3. He could be unusable. We'll see. I do think he's going to bounce back, from that fibula injury because he kind of came back last year. He got it out of his system. And I think this year, Andy Reid just said that he looks fantastic. And I hope that it's not just coach speak, and I hope that's true. But I do agree with you. I do think DeAndre Swift has a huge range of outcomes as well. When he was with Ben Johnson, he was averaging like 5 targets per game, but then he went ahead and traded him away. So that, I don't know what to believe here. I don't know if he likes him or not, but they haven't made a move at the position outside of drafting Monangai super late. So we'll see what happens, but there's a possibility that we see DeAndre Swift kind of move up there. But I think the safest option, the guy who we think with the talent profile and the potentially run-heavy offense, I think Omarion Hampton with the Najee Harris eye patch situation, it could be going in his favor for sure as the RB1 in this list.
Faraz, fantastic stuff, my friend. Again, Upper Hand Fantasy. Thank you so much for joining the Fantasy Live Show. I'm sure we'll get together again another time, my friend. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Have a great weekend. Good luck in your fantasy drafts. We'll be back here on Monday. So for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, for Faraz, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, take care, everybody.